Welcome back, everybody. This is the Glentendo podcast, a weekly Nintendo podcast. We talk a lot of crap. We cover the news. We have Galaxy Mega Brain conversations on all things Nintendo. If you'd like early access to the show and some bonus content, or you just want to keep the show alive, become a friendo on Patreon, patreon.com/Glentendo. Even just the $2 a month tier, you get early access to every show, and it keeps this ship floating. There's a lot of stuff that we'd probably want to buy to like improve the show in terms of audio equipment. There's always like a never-ending list of stuff. So any and all support greatly appreciated. The show comes out every Thursday for supporters and becomes free to all the following Sunday. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And also, my frequent guest, Arhungry, is here, and he makes great videos on YouTube, Galaxy Brain stuff on all sorts of games, not just Nintendo nerd stuff like me. Go check that out, youtube.com/Arhungry. Arhungry, how are you doing?
It's late, man. It's pretty late.
It's pretty late.
A little
But
tired.
how do you but I didn't ask how late it was. I asked how you're feeling.
I was setting up to it, setting up
Yeah.
the aura.
Mhm.
It's late, I had to work today, and I was constantly being held up by a singular man.
I will admit that today, unexpected things happened, and I'm not here to defend myself. I'm just here to say I'm sorry.
I accept your apology, but I still have to complain about it.
On the record, apology accepted. Oh yeah, wait. Before we begin the show, one more thing. So you guys, anyone who's been listening for the past few weeks knows I've been promoting this Smash Brothers Invitational that we did. It actually happened this past weekend. We just raised over $300 for Michael's Miracles, a diabetes charity, and not bad for just a few hours of Smash. So anyone who tuned in from the show or anyone who supported it anyway, thank you guys very much. That was hype. That tournament was actually really fun. I ended up getting third place, and it was really fun to compete in. So thanks to everyone who supported that. I actually donated. I third place won only like $50, but I just donated half of it to charity, and then the other 25 I bought myself a sandwich.
A $25 sandwich?
Well, I bought myself a sandwich.
How good was that sandwich? That sandwich was the best sandwich of your life.
I didn't say that I didn't have change afterward. I just said I used that in part for a sandwich.
You know that scene of Pulp Fiction where it's like a $5 milkshake?
Yeah. She's like, that better be the best milkshake you've ever had. And then he sips it and he's like, that's a pretty good milkshake.
Yeah.
Any Tarantino references, I'm going to catch them, bro. That guy's movies are the most quotable. Like his lines in each of his movies are so quotable. Like I feel like that's almost like 90% of his films is like how good.
Quotes.
Yeah, like how good the conversations are, right?
Yeah.
Like, say what again? I dare you. I double dare you. You guys could finish that one at home. So yeah, you're doing good. You're a little tired. Sorry for the holdup. Apology accepted. We're moving on.
You're gonna have to edit out some yawns, the step them
Yeah,
out
I'm
ahead of
editing it out.
time.
Yeah, I mean, we're recording this the day before Thanksgiving, so you're off tomorrow anyway. Don't act like you were in a rush
I have
to
things to
go to
do.
sleep.
First of all, I have things to do. I still haven't had my workout yet. I was gonna work out earlier, but no, I had to wait.
Well, now you're gonna do it, so don't worry about it.
I'll
We
do it.
got this.
I'll do it. I'll do it. You'll do it. We'll all do it together.
We're gonna do it. So yeah, there's not actually a lot of stuff. There's not a lot of different things that happened in the news this week. There's just one really big thing that happened, and particularly for us as people who are come from the Smash community on our like just we're ingrained in the culture of Smash Bros. As everybody who listens to this podcast knows, we cover all things Nintendo, but we have a special focus on the Smash community. I think there's going to be a lot of Nintendo podcasts and gaming podcasts that cover this week's big headlines, but none of them are going to be able to cover it from our perspective as people who are from the Smash community. And like, particularly me, I have experience running a 200 plus man event, a regional, and obviously competing and knowing a bunch of TOs and knowing, a bunch of the competitors and the big tournaments and going to all those tournaments. Arhungry's been to a lot of these tournaments. I actually wanted to ask you before we get into like what actually happened and what we're going to talk about. I never actually asked you like what was your first Smash Bros tournament? Like when, what year, and where was it?
Um, so the first one I went to for real was a brawl tournament. I think it was called Rescue. It's
Hmm.
where it's where RJ used to host events in that firehouse thing.
Oh, so wait, was that what became Smash Forever?
Yes,
Gotcha. Okay.
and it was a brawl tournament, and it was the only brawl tournament I ever went to, and I beat Biddy there.
Let's go. Wait, so that was before Smash 4 came out on the Wii U, right?
Yeah, and that I didn't go to that was like at the end. I was thinking that's like maybe 2012. So uh, maybe even later, maybe 2013. I don't know, but it
Yeah,
was
cuz
really late into the cycle of the game.
yeah, definitely cuz Smash Wii U came out 2014, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, yeah, so then obviously that's from before I met you, and then we met around I think 2015-ish,
yeah.
and
Well, that's when I really started to go to tournaments. Like
yeah.
I started going like so that was one tournament I went to in 2013, maybe 2012, whatever, and then 2015, summer of 2015, I started to attend them a little more regularly. And then 2016, I went to them all the time. So
Yeah, right,
that's
and
how it
it's like
goes.
I remember I went to like 1 or 2 events. But then when I around the time where I met you, I think when me and you started going to events together is when I really got into it because my first 2 events I went with like I went one time my first event I ever went to was with Dugan, but we didn't go together ever again to an event. Like it was just a one-time thing, and I was like not into Smash. Yeah, that first event, um, I didn't do horrible. Like I didn't go 0-2 or anything, but at the same time, I didn't have enough fun where I wanted to come back. It was later on when I like met you and the rest of our like little friend group that I really got into going frequently. Um, so yeah, that was around 2015. This week's news made me very sad because I've been going to tournaments since 2015 and watching tournaments since 2015. And one of the major tournaments that I used to look forward to watching every single year, I have not missed a single one of these tournaments. A top 8 from this tournament, I haven't missed a single top 8 since 2015. So this week, we have a statement from the people who run the Big House. And the statement goes the Big House is heartbroken to share we received a cease and desist from Nintendo of America to cancel our upcoming online event. We were informed we do not have permission to host or broadcast the event, primarily due to the use of Slippy. Sadly, all of our competitions are affected. We are forced to comply with the order and cancel the Big House online for both Melee and Ultimate. Refund information will be sent shortly. We apologize to all those impacted. So, for people that don't know, the Big House is a huge annual Smash Brothers tournament series in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's run by this guy named Juggle Rob, and he's like a pretty prominent Melee player. Like I've actually seen that he actually used to do really well at like really big Melee events. And this tournament series, the Big House, it's taken place every year since 2011, starting with Melee and over the years, including like Project M, which is a mod for Smash Brothers Brawl, and then going into Smash 4 on the Wii U, and obviously Ultimate. So just in general, before we get into um, dissecting this announcement and everything, just what are your memories of the Big House? Are you like me, where like you've seen? I have very fond memories of going to like our friends' houses and just watching top eights and seeing insane sets.
Well, like for us, like these are like the bowl games, like the Rose Bowl, the Super Bowl, like the Big House, like Genesis, like those are like our like big games of the year. If anyone's familiar with like football
Yeah,
competitions. So I was always really excited to watch it, and the Big House top eights have some of the most legendary sets ever. So
Mhm.
and across all Smash games. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great tournament series. At least from a viewing standpoint, I don't think I've ever been to one. No, I don't think.
Yeah, I definitely never been to one, but 'cause it was always, like, in a time of the year that I'm not like, I wasn't go ready to go anywhere. The only
Yeah,
events that I would always go to events, like, in the summer mostly, unless it was something really close by that we could drive
yeah,
to, but Ann Arbor, Michigan is kinda far. This announcement is super tragic, and just like we mentioned, like, this event is legendary, man, and, like, a lot of us have watched this tournament series every single year. I'm actually dude, this year is so weird because we didn't have an E3, and now there's, like, things like this that I didn't really even think about. It's so painful to think that this year just doesn't exist in so many different ways, and so Smash Twitter was completely set ablaze by this announcement, and people were getting really, really angry at Nintendo specifically for this cease and desist. And this is also just part of like a longer list of ways that Nintendo has gotten in the way of the Smash community's growth. We're going to get into that a little bit more later. For now, we're kind of just going to focus on this one big house cease and desist. And let me just read Nintendo's message, their response to this, and then we'll kind of discuss how we feel about this in general. So, Nintendo appreciates the love and dedication the fighting game community has for the Super Smash Bros. Series. We have partnered with numerous Super Smash Bros. Tournaments in the past and have hosted our own online and offline tournaments for the game. And we plan to continue that support in the future. Unfortunately, the upcoming Big House tournament announced plans to host an online tournament for Super Smash Bros. Melee that requires use of illegally copied versions of the game in conjunction with a mod called Slippy during their online event. Nintendo therefore contacted the tournament organizers to ask them to stop. They refused, leaving Nintendo no choice but to step in to protect its intellectual property and brands. Nintendo cannot condone or allow piracy of its intellectual property. So once these two statements hit the Twitter and things, it was canceled. And again, with the larger background of just many years of Nintendo having very mixed messaging and signals in terms of how much they want to support the Smash community, they created this hashtag. All the top players, a lot of players in the Smash community, they've been using this hashtag free melee and hashtag save Smash. So it's been trending. It's like I've seen it as a major. I've seen it reported on other major sites. It's actually become like a huge hashtag, like overnight. So, what's your initial reaction to this entire thing?
Well, the my first reaction was, why are all the competitions affected? You know, like that was just like that just makes no sense to me.
I'm just glad that you said that because I'm surprised no one on Twitter has mentioned this. Like everyone's complaints towards Nintendo have not included that. My complaint about this is why is Ultimate not allowed to happen over Melee? So another quick little bit of context that people need is that obviously Smash Brothers Melee came out in 2001 on the GameCube. It is not an online functional game. So over the quarantine, with all the tournaments, did the local events dead, a bunch of fans created a version of Melee with rollback netcode. If you want to know what that means, go back to one of our previous episodes. We go really deep into explaining that, but it's basically really great online netcode so that the connections are super smooth. And a fan made a mod of Smash Brothers Melee so you could play it online, and it has better netcode than Ultimate, like not even close. So Nintendo sends this cease and desist, and the entire tournament is over. Like they had a problem with this mod of a pirated version of Melee and then Slippy. But Ultimate is also now the entire event, including Ultimate, is gone.
That was like for my initial reaction to the Big House statement, right?
Yeah.
And then I read the Nintendo statement, and it says that they asked them to stop to not use the Slippy mod for the melee event, right? Um, so it sounds like that they just ignored them did it anyway, and then got the cease and desist. It wasn't an immediate cease and desist. It was like they asked them to not use it and just host Ultimate, right? And they refused to do that,
Yeah.
right? That's what I'm reading of it, right?
I mean, it literally says in the statement, they refused, leaving
Yeah,
us no choice.
yeah. And who knows, like who knows how true that is,
Right.
We're only reading statements,
Yeah.
we weren't behind the doors, but I don't have a reason to believe they lied about that.
Yeah.
So to me, it's also kind of a little bit their fault. It's like you could have just not run melee if Nintendo stopped asked you to stop.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. And dude, the other element to this is that it's almost like Smashers are living in another universe because in my all right, so I don't know how you have an official partnership with Nintendo. Since 2015, the Big House series has officially partnered with Nintendo, right? And we're going to get into a little later what it means when these guys choose to partner, but regardless, unlike many other big events for Smash, you have a direct partnership with Nintendo in some form. How did you even think that they were going to be okay with you promoting a pirated version of Melee? Like I'm not here to tell you. We'll get into it later again whether I think it's right or wrong. I'm not here to say I'll make a moral statement. I'm just saying like at a glance from a business perspective, I don't understand what you thought was going to happen. And then you receive according to Nintendo, if the statement is correct, which I'm willing to say it is because I think if anything that in their statement was wrong, I think you would have heard a statement from Big House saying, "No, this is wrong." Like the community is against Nintendo in this example, and I think the people from Big House have every incentive to kind of like set the story straight if this is wrong. So I'm going to go with what Nintendo said here and just assume that they did send you a cease and desist for Melee because it's a pirated version of the game. Like, dude, they have a company policy. Like, these guys don't even put their games on PlayStation. You think they're gonna put it pirated for free on the computer and then let you, pay money or whatever their partnership means to promote a pirated version of their game? Like, this is the last company that would ever allow this. You know what I'm saying? So, like,
Yeah,
did you have that reaction that I did where I'm like, again, I'm not trying to make a moral statement here that Nintendo's right or wrong in this. I'm just saying, what did you think was going to happen?
that was kind of what I was going. Where it's like okay, so let's set some clear lines on in the ground, right? A lot of people on Twitter are saying, "Oh, this isn't illegal," right?
Yeah.
Dolphin and Slippy, right? Because Slippy is like a mod of Dolphin. It's not a mod of Melee; it's a mod of Dolphin, right?
What is Dolphin exactly? If you could kind of condense that
Okay,
for anyone who doesn't follow any of this stuff.
okay. So we previously spoke about what an emulator is, right? It
Yeah.
kind of recreates a machine, right, or anything, right?
Yeah.
And this emulator, it emulates a GameCube. It kind of makes a virtual GameCube in your computer,
Yeah.
and you could use that GameCube on your computer to play Melee, right? So the Slippy mod uh, is for Dolphin. So
Right.
Dolphin in and itself is not illegal. Emulation in and of itself is not illegal, right? Nintendo emulates things, right? Every like Sony emulates things, Xbox emulates things, right? The emulation by itself is not illegal, Even if other companies do it, it's technically not illegal to do it, right?
Yeah.
This has already been settled in court. PlayStation actually sued a company over this thing that played PlayStation games, and the courts decided that it was not illegal. So emulation is not illegal, right? And that's what people are saying on Twitter, right? Slippy is not illegal, right? And they're correct in that, right? But a pirated copy of the game, which I am sure that everyone is using, right?
Yeah.
That is illegal, right? That's kind of like the key to this, right? Where it's like you can't just ignore the fact that you are also doing something illegal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you know how Nintendo feels about piracy, right? So where's the mystery? Where's like the
What did you think was gonna happen?
yeah,
So, that the fact that they were ballsy enough to be like, "We have a partnership with them, and we have a stolen version of their game that we're gonna promote, and they're going to promote it for us because they're partnering with us." And as like I said, we're gonna get into what that means later, but, like, generally speaking, a lot of what these partnerships mean is that Nintendo uses all of their platforms, whether it's on social media or on Twitch or whatever, so that you get more visibility for your tournament. So, how does it make sense from their perspective to promote your event when you're promoting a stolen version of their game?
yeah, and so this isn't which is also confusing because the Big House originally was also like really known for Project M, right?
Mhm.
And they dropped Project M because they wanted to partner with Nintendo.
Yes.
So I don't understand why they would not do the same with Melee. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
if they were, like, they could have just ran Ultimate. You know, it would have been disappointing if you would have complained about it anyway, right? But you'd still be having a tournament. You know?
Now, here's the thing, everyone on Twitter is making the argument that they're making a moral argument. Like, they're making the decision saying that they understand everything we just explained. They know that, uh, the copies of Melee that are used with Slippy are illegal copies of Melee. They know all that. What their argument is that Nintendo is being petty and that they're being, greedy because they make all this money and they're not offering Melee in a modern way. So for you to play it in any form, and especially during a pandemic where people can't even play it in person, this is a game that you can't even they're not even printing new copies of. So the only copies that are out there are really expensive to get. So if you want to run a Melee tournament, it is very difficult for you to get the game, get a setup, get a Wii or a GameCube to run it. Even getting a CRT, an old TV, is kind of hard
That
for
people
this
don't make anymore.
that they don't make anymore. So part of the frustration comes from the fact that people's the best version of the argument I've heard, there's a lot of stupid arguments, but the best version I've heard is Nintendo is mad that someone is pirating a game that they don't even sell anymore. So they're not losing money off of this game because they don't sell this game anymore. And so there's no harm in people using this game and in this fashion, especially during a pandemic when they have no option. So my reaction to that argument, and I want to hear what you have to say about that too, is that makes a lot of sense, and that's the only part of this that I'm sympathetic towards. Because, like I said earlier, I don't sympathize with you having a partnership with Nintendo and expecting them not to shut you down. Like that part of it makes no sense that you would have thought that you could get away with that. But when it comes to Slippy, I think this proves a couple things for me. I was telling a friend the other day, I'm like, dude, you don't think Nintendo knows about Slippy? Like, we've already proven, especially in the earlier episode where we talked about netcode and some of Sakurai's columns, these guys they have a method where they listen to the community. Maybe they don't take all of our advice, but they know what we're talking about. And a lot of the changes that have been made in Ultimate are directly from things that we have complained about. So they have eyes and ears everywhere. We have people like Bill Trinan, who, he's Miyamoto's personal translator at all events. He works for Nintendo of America, and I see him interact with top Smash players on Twitter all the time. I've seen a bunch of other people, figureheads, who understand and follow Smashers. And for the past few months, all the top players have been retweeting, VODs of them playing Slippy. And so it's not that I think people are kind of missing the fact that Nintendo could have just shut down Slippy frame one, like the whole thing, not just the tournaments where it's being used, but literally the entire thing, like they did with a lot of other fan made mods, and they didn't.
Well,
Now, I'm not
I
here.
don't think they could have. I mean, they could have threatened something, right? And then Sleepy would have maybe been shut down because of the legal threat, right? But I don't think that's a case that they would have won. Because again, it's not a mod of Melee; it's a mod of Dolphin, and Dolphin is illegal. It's a legal thing to do. Emulation is legal.
Yeah, right. What the point I was trying to make is that um, people are acting like Nintendo doesn't know about this. It's almost like an unspoken agreement that it's like, dude, we are gonna pretend that this isn't a thing, because we could shut it down. We could threaten all these players who are retweeting Slippy and their top players. All of them could Nintendo can get involved with all that. It's not that hard, and they haven't. They got involved when you tried to use their own sponsored event to promote it. There's a big difference there. So that's not a defense of Nintendo. I'm just trying to make sure people are talking about the same thing because people are going so crazy on Twitter over this that they're talking about like 7 different things. The rage is shooting in every direction, and a lot of it doesn't make any sense. Um, so I think that's part of it. But then again, going back to where the part that I'm sympathetic towards is that, you know, it is true that this is a game that you cannot get in any other form. And there really is no other way to play Melee and do a Melee tournament at Big House in any other fashion because of the pandemic and because of how difficult it is to get Melee in general. So I'm kind of sympathetic with that part of the argument. But at the same time, Nintendo, as they said in their statement, like, dude, they can't make you can't make exceptions when you run a business like that. Like, it's like they are not for piracy in any way, shape, or form. Literally earlier today, there were statements that were released from like a trial where they were in New Zealand or something where there's some huge piracy problem. And they had like their lawyers dealing with it. And like a lot of that information leaked today. They're having a huge problem with piracy as a company that they've been fighting. This is like the number one thing that defines Nintendo is their intellectual property. So I'm just like, I get it, but I feel like people are making an emotional argument about this that they should make an exception for Melee because of the circumstances and because it's an old game and because Ultimate's Online is crap.
I get what you're saying, and I get what they're saying, and I just feel like the outrage should be towards, well, like, what I've seen some also talk about is a general outrage towards Nintendo, right?
Yeah,
And I feel like that's fair. I actually feel like that's fair because it's like, a lot of these things wouldn't be issues if they were more modern or sensible with their way of thinking, you know?
yeah,
Because the a big thing that I always point to is the Sega um, Genesis collection that's on Steam, right?
yeah,
You can buy that collection and you got like 30 Genesis games, right? Classic Genesis games, Sonic games, Streets of Rage, whatever, right? And they're just ROM folders. You know, it comes with a built-in emulator, like this cool little like virtual room that like simulates what
yeah. I
a
saw that.
'90s kids like Genesis
Bedroom would look
fan,
like.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it has all, but that's all the ROMs, and those ROMs just now are, you own those ROMs, right?
yeah.
You can pop that ROM into a different emulator if you really wanted to, right? So like, and no one is like worried about Sonic's intellectual property from that, you know. So it's a really backwards and I would say greedy way of thinking for them, right?
hmm
And a lot of that wouldn't be an issue. It wouldn't be an issue. So I kind of sympathize with the general grievance of Nintendo. But in terms of this specific situation,
Yeah.
I can't really say anything about it that's like, other than, yeah, it makes sense to what else they've always been doing, you know? It's
And
like,
also like, we're gonna move on now to like the bigger trend of and not just the big house situation, but like I just I actually think that on the big house situation specifically, there's gonna be a lot of stuff that I disagree with and agree with Nintendo on moving into this conversation. But on this big house situation, they gave you a choice and you said no. And the whole thing had to be shut down. And I think that the big house made the wrong choice. You guys can hate on me, at me on Twitter, whatever you guys want. And you guys can argue with me all day. At the end of the day, Big House was given a choice. Nintendo's lawyers have rules and they have to follow those rules of intellectual property. And they're not just about to turn a blind eye and promote piracy with their own money. And you guys chose to shut down the entire event. It could have just been Ultimate. And again, maybe we'll find out more information that Nintendo's statement on this is not accurate. But if we're going just off that and just off the Big House statement, Big House made the wrong choice here. And so that's my final take on that specific case. And now we'll move on to like how this is a much bigger conversation because then things got a lot worse. So these hashtags come out, right? We found out Big House is canceled. People create these insane hashtags that say free melee, save Smash. Literally every top player is retweeting it. And an anonymous Twitter account posts a long statement explaining what it's been like to work with Nintendo on growing the Smash community over the past like decade. And the tweet goes on in detail on many occasions where different esports organizations have gone out of their way to work with Nintendo in some capacity, even sometimes like at a loss or just like not to make a profit at all. And Nintendo's response, according to these sources, is that it's ranging from leaving people on red for months or even years, or just dipping their toe in halfway and like never fully embracing the Smash community or the esports opportunities to make Smash a bigger esport. So this info is not verified. It's an anonymous Twitter. I'm actually a little annoyed how fast and emotional everyone on Twitter got and just accepting this anonymous tweet and all the information in it because we literally just went through this past summer where someone would put out an accusation of something crazy and everyone would jump on that bandwagon, and then a month later or a week later or a day later someone would post the counter argument against the accusation and everyone would jump on that bandwagon and go, damn, we shouldn't have believed that first one just without thinking about it, and now I don't know who to believe. And so this is like, I'm kind of annoyed that this just happened again. And like everyone, because Nintendo's an entity and it's not even a person, people don't even look at it that way. It's so easy to just go, yep, all this is true. So I can say though that from my experience and from the people I've talked to who have run events, and the anecdotal information I have, a lot of the stuff in that tweet is very likely. I'm not going to say it's 100% true, but it is very, very likely.
Or even if a lot of it's true and some of it isn't, so that could be also be the case.
Yeah, and I'll tell people to please go on Twitter and find that tweet. I'm sure you can find it very quickly. I personally don't want to read the whole thing out; it's a little too long for like a podcast or whatever. Um, but it made me think about how it turned into this bigger conversation. So it started with the Big House thing, then it turned into this bigger conversation of how Nintendo has not embraced the Smash community or done enough to promote the Smash community. And then this tweet comes out, and the tweet goes through how, obviously they snubbed a lot of esports opportunities, but they also in the tweet it kind of details and implies that Nintendo just kind of like abused the community for marketing purposes, and that turned everything into this bigger topic of how Nintendo's this greedy company that doesn't want anything to do with Smash other than, make its own money from Smash and abuse the community. So I actually reached out to like a really big TO that I know personally, and he's done a lot of huge events. And I actually asked him for the purpose of this conversation, what does it actually mean when Nintendo partners with a tournament like Big House, for example? Because I think it's important while we're discussing this and while everyone is dumping on Nintendo for their approach to supporting Smash, that we actually have the context of like, what does it really mean when they actually do partner with the Smash community? So he said, quote, it's not much. It's basically an advertising method for both parties. When Nintendo sponsors an event, it gives an open door for a larger reach by appealing to more of the casual crowd. Think of it like a stamp of approval. In some cases, they will advertise newly released games or unannounced game. In turn, for the organizer, it gives them reach of getting some players to the event who otherwise wouldn't have heard about it. But a bigger step to this is the streaming views. Getting sponsored via Nintendo gives you a larger reach for viewing purposes, and depending on the event, a front page slot on Twitch. So, what do you take? What's your take on this larger conversation about Nintendo's approach to partnering with events? Do you, first of all, do you believe the tweet and what it alleges? And second, you know, do you think that they haven't done enough based off of this TO's statement and what that means.
Um, first I'll address the tweet. Right, the tweet
Yeah.
longer. The tweet longer again. It's an anonymous thing. Anyone could have wrote it. Right, I could have wrote it. There was a lot of half statements in it. Right, it's like this leads me to believe that's how they feel. It's like this isn't like definitive like screenshots and whatever. It's kind of things that people kind of knew already. So I'm like, why are people angry? We all knew this already, right? We all knew that there's not big support for Smash. It's not something that's a mystery. It's just something that we all kind of like are not happy with. But we've been not happy with it for years and years and years and years and years, right? Um, the next one is the if I agree with Nintendo's approach to this, right? Something like that. Yeah, I'm not really happy with that. You know, because it's crazy to see something like Valve, who hosts the international, right, for Dota 2, right, and like you can spend money in Dota 2, and that money goes to the prize pool of the game,
Yeah.
and it's their game. They're promoting it within their game, within their platform, and they're hosting the biggest event for that game. You know, and that's not something Nintendo couldn't do. It'd be really easy for them to do. It doesn't sound like it's a hard thing. Well, this is like a multi-billion-dollar company. It wouldn't hurt them that much. Even
Right.
if it was a failure.
Yeah. And so when I read that tweet, like I said, all the stuff in it is not verified, but in my experience and from the people I've talked to and the TOs that I've interacted with and all that, very likely that that stuff is true. I actually, some of the stuff that they detail in that anonymous tweet, I had heard vague rumblings of like years ago, like, oh, the Red Bull thing. I remember hearing about that. So I can at least say it has some kind of like uh legitimacy in that regard.
And the famous ninja tweet where he has like the Donkey Kong gif. It's like, "Hey, Smash community, I got something cooking for you." And
Yeah.
every few months, everyone says it's burnt. Trying to get
Yeah.
some clout real quick.
Yeah, and he went on to later say that it just didn't materialize whatever they were planning.
And
But
it
clearly
was it was kind of like he kind of I think he said it didn't materialize because of a disagreement with Nintendo/Twitch, right?
yes.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't really expanded upon, but the blame almost fell entirely on him. Like we don't know. It could have been more to them than him.
Yeah, 100%. So the only thing that I disagree with in the anonymous tweet and the things that people were saying afterwards, I'm going to I'm going to circle back here guys cuz I know there's a lot of smashers that are fans and are listening to this and maybe they think I'm being soft on Nintendo, whatever. Like, you guys already know, I'm completely biased. I'm Miyamoto's pool boy. I mow Reggie's lawn. I wore all black for 3 months when Iwata died. Like, I can't be trusted, clearly. All right. I'm compromised. So, if you're one of those people that, if I don't agree with Twitter on if there's no gray area for you, and there's no explanation for me to disagree other than me being completely biased. If you're one of those people, like, just don't listen to this podcast. Like, this is not for you. I'm going to take Nintendo to task on all this stuff soon. But I'm going to start with the easier stuff that I disagree with on the Smash community first. I want you guys to remember, man, like the things have gotten so emotional and so irrational on Twitter that I need to remind people I'm one of you guys. Okay. I am not Miyamoto's pool boy. All right. So, that being said, the thing I really disagree with, and the thing I'm actually going to defend Nintendo on a lot in this whole statement and what the conversations these statements have spawned is that Nintendo abused the community for marketing purposes. Like, let me explain something to you, bro. The Smash community is less than a fourth of the people who buy Smash Brothers. It is a very small part of the community compared to the overall amount of people who buy this game. So I'm bringing that up to illustrate the point that in terms of marketing, Nintendo does not need you. They don't need us. They don't need to market by using us and top players and having them play the game. They really don't. Okay. We need them way more than they need us. Smash Brothers was going to sell 20 million copies regardless of the Smash community. I really want people to understand that. The second thing is that I think Nintendo actually did an amazing job in terms of getting involved to use their visibility to promote the Smash community indirectly. I'm going to get to what they should have done with other things later, but in terms of saying that they abused them for us for marketing, I really have a problem with that because at E3 when they reveal Ultimate, they invited top commentators. Not they also had like random dudes that were from other industries that nobody in Smash knows, but they got people that run our events. They got the right people. They had people like Vicky, they had people like TK, they had Coney, they had all these people that we all respect and run, we all love these people. They commentate our thing and they got to be front and center at E3, along with the top players who were invited, not just from Smash 4, but from Melee. And let me remind you how big of a deal that is. E3 is the most visibility that Nintendo gets from the press all year. Not just not just Nintendo, the entire video game industry. Time magazine is going to be writing about things that happen at E3. It's the only time that the industry gets visibility from like the extended media that has nothing to do with video games. So they didn't have to do any of that stuff. They didn't have to have a back room where all of our top players got to meet and shake Sakurai's hand. They didn't have to do any of that. You guys, we benefited off of that more than Nintendo did by amplifying your platforms. You guys probably got thousands of Twitter followers and people following you on Twitch, and that helped the community in an indirect fashion. It wasn't the best. I get that. But please don't say that they were abusing us for marketing because that angle literally makes no sense. Like literally Arhungry, you yourself, you were in a video on Nintendo's official YouTube
This is true.
because
This is
you
true.
were in a Nairo video and they didn't have to do a player spotlight on Nairo. They didn't have to do that. And that was so extra. That was even outside of E3. That was like I think that was when Ultimate was already a year old, right? Like it was already out for a while.
No, yeah, it had been out for I think this was the tail end of 2019, right?
Yeah.
Something around there.
Yeah. So you benefited off that. Maybe you didn't directly because you're just in the video. It's not like about you, but like that Nairo video was very helpful to Nairo's career and all those things. Like Nintendo has billions of people watching that company and what they do. So I'm just going to clear that part out. I want people to just please stop tweeting that. Please, man. They didn't, it's not this emotional thing where the big bully in the corporate office came and bullied the guy and took advantage of you as the little man. Like that whole argument needs to go. That argument makes no sense at all. So, um, the other thing I want to just say on that, and I'm so sorry because I know I'm going long, but there's this, it goes into that narrative of it being like a corporate entity. And people forget that Nintendo is a company of people, it's a group of artists and businessmen. And they're in the business of making entertainment and art. And the other part of this argument that I just don't understand is that people are saying that this is part of a bigger pattern where they keep shutting down fan mod games and that these games are games where they're not making money off these games anymore. And the fans are making better versions of it. And you guys already have billions of dollars. So why do you care? And it's like, they shut down that Metroid 2 mod. Uh, and that's a good example because they were making their own remake of Metroid 2. So in a way, maybe they could have lost money because they were going to make a new version of that. And there was the Mario Battle Royale thing that they shut down recently because Mario 35 was coming out. And even Melee and Smash is kind of different. They don't re-release Smash games because the new one is supposed to kind of replace the old one. It's not like, even though I disagree with that approach, I think that each game should exist individually. Like Zelda, Link to the Past is always going to exist, no matter how good Ocarina of Time is. You know what I mean? So with Smash, their approach is to kind of give you a new one that's an updated version. It's not like it's intended to be a replacement. But Nintendo's a group of artists, and you guys need to remember that somebody made Metroid with their passion, and they care about that. It's not just a building named Nintendo. There are artists in there who made that property, and they didn't give you the permission to steal it. They made it. They made it with their money and their time. And if you knew these people on a first name basis, you would not be okay with pirating their stuff. The fact that you don't know their name is the reason why you don't do it, because you can hide behind your computer screen. So this whole concept that they're the greedy ones, you're the greedy one. You're the one who's stealing a game that you didn't make and you didn't pay for.
Hold on,
You know what
hold
I'm
on,
saying?
hold on, hold on, hold on. You're going a little too far now. Okay,
Argue with me, man.
okay, because I wanted to give you some space because you were getting really passionate, right?
Yeah.
I think we interrupt each other a little bit sometimes, so I was
Yeah.
gonna give you a little free reign, but I think you're going a little too far right now,
I
right?
appreciate it. And please tell me where I'm wrong on that.
Okay, first of all, we're gonna start with piracy, right? And
Yeah.
this is the point that I bring up all the time. I've said it on the podcast before, right? I've said it on my Twitter before. I've said it in my life over the course of many years, right? Piracy, to quote Gabe Newell, the great Gabe Newell, to grow the great company that is Valve. Not perfect, not perfect, but definitely the best we got in the video game industry, right? Piracy is not about stealing, right? It is a service issue, right? You realize how today everyone has Spotify, everyone has Netflix. Kids today don't know how to pirate things anymore. You know why? Because it's easy. It is so much easier to pay someone money to get all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the problem. That's the real problem. That's the real source of this, right? If Nintendo sold all these things, right, like the Virtual Console, right? The Virtual Console made money. Everybody bought Virtual Console games, you know? I bought multiple versions of Virtual Console games, right? It's not about stealing, right? So I don't really like this narrative at all. I've always disliked that. There are exceptions. There are people in this world that just want to steal things. They don't want to pay for things, right? And for whatever reason, you know, so to say piracy is wrong, I don't agree with that. I see piracy is a countermeasure to bad service. If you don't want people to pirate, the counter service is to provide an easier time. You know, it's much easier for me to boot up my Switch, right? Download Melee, right? If it was possible, as this is hypothetical, right? And then play online there. I don't want to go on my computer and then download a mod and work see how it's installing it, right? That's not what I want to do, right? I want to just play the game. I want to support. Most people want to support. People who pirate games, they're not looking to steal money. They're not looking to steal your property or, you know, like it's not because and the reason that Nintendo has like the biggest piracy problem is because people love Nintendo games.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, so it's not a thing about oh it's they don't deserve my money, right? I'm not going to pay for it even if it's available. That's not the case. People do want to pay for things if it's the best way for them to do it. So piracy in a way is helpful to companies because you now have to force yourself to do better, and in a way it's better for us too, you know, even if we never pirated anything, you know, like never once in your life you have benefited from piracy just because companies have to now compete with pirates, you know?
Yeah. So first of all, I 100% agree with what you're saying. And I just want to say, when I say stealing, I definitely mean it with like a lowercase s, like very soft. Like I don't mean to equate it to you robbing a bank or like breaking into a guy's home or something. You know what I mean? Like I get it. When I was younger, I emulated games on my computer when I was like 10 years old because I didn't think about it. The part of this that I don't the point I was trying to make, because I fully agree with what you're saying, and not just the Gabe Newell quote. This even happened in the music industry. Steve Jobs famously, before they made iTunes and the iPod, he was telling the music industry, "You guys are dying because Napster is stealing all your music and giving it to people for free." But the thing is, people would pay if you gave them a better service, and then they didn't believe him, and then he proved it with iTunes, and everything has been better since. And now we're in the streaming, whatever. So I agree with your point, 1,000%. The part that I don't agree with is that just because an artist, in this case, a group of artists called Nintendo, that is a point that everyone needs to remember. Stop referring to them like they're some corporate entity of just random dudes. These guys are trying to make money so they can continue to make great stuff.
Hold on.
Like,
To also comment on that, there are also a lot of businessmen in Nintendo that don't care about games, right? That's also 100% true.
yeah, but hold on. So that's true, and more proof to your point is like if you look at the investor meetings, it's like again, I made fun of that in a previous episode. Like people ask questions where you're like, this guy has he has 20 shares or whatever, 200 shares of Nintendo, and he's asking them questions that you would never ask that question if you played a video game for 5 seconds in your life. Like some of the people involved, I'm not trying to say that it's a purely altruistic entity and that there's no businessman and it's just pure and it's artists. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that like there is a group of artists that are at the center of that. If you look at Miyamoto and his interviews or Aonuma and his interviews, these guys are not they're trying to have fun by making great games and they obviously have business interests too. They're not idiots, but it's like if it was purely business, Mario would be on every device. There's more to it than just business. So I'm just pushing back on the fact that a lot of people are
To be fair,
yeah,
Mario not being on all platforms is also a business decision.
true. The narrative that people are saying is that Nintendo's a greedy company and that they're just trying to, keep farming money out of us. And it's like, look, obviously they are trying to make money because they need to survive
They
and
are a business.
they are a business, yes. But you're completely overlooking that if they were into short-term profit, you would see Mario on every cell phone in the world for $10 each, and they would sell trillions of dollars. So clearly money can't be the only thing that they're after. And please don't simplify this complex issue into just they're greedy and want us to buy Ultimate, so they're getting rid of, this and this and that. But to go back to the main point I was gonna make is because we kind of really sidetracked there. But the reason I brought up the business and the all that stuff is because you were mentioning how if they had a better service, people wouldn't pirate, and I 100% agree with that. There's no defense of Ultimates Online, right? Which is kind of why people wanted to play Slippy. I know a lot of people who played Slippy not because they like Melee better than Ultimate, because they just wanted to play Smash Brothers online with good online with rollback.
Yep.
So 100% agree. But just because that entity is not offering you the service, does it still doesn't make it right or moral for you to take it. And that's the only point I was trying to make is like I agree with you in the sense that if you zoom out, right, and you go, how do we solve this problem? You're 100% right. The way to solve the problem is to create a better service so that there's
Yeah.
no demand for piracy. But even even though I agree with that, when you zoom into the person to person level, if somebody makes something, they made it with their money, their effort, their talent. They put so many resources into making these games and you don't get to decide whether you get it or not. It's not a basic human right that are denying you. They're not denying you water and oxygen. They're denying you something that they made that has no reason to exist other than the fact that they made it. So I agree with you, but I'm also like, that doesn't make it okay to pirate it. And to go back to what we're mainly talking about, so for you to use pirated copies of Melee to do this, to use this Slippy mod, that's not okay, just because they don't give you another option. Now, we're going to get into solutions for this. I'm going to take massive dumps on Nintendo in a second over all of this. But there's no part of this conversation where it becomes okay, where you guys can rationalize a million ways from Sunday, a way for it's okay to steal a piece of art that someone else made. Okay? That is never going to be okay. That's never going to be part of the argument. And it's never going to be that's not going to be acceptable. And especially as a company, Nintendo's not going to accept it.
Yeah. So the last thing I was going to say on that is that um, software piracy is a tricky thing, right?
Mhm.
Because and I kind of hate saying it, but it's also kind of like it it's illegal, but it's not necessarily immoral
Right. It is a
because
gray area. Yeah.
yeah. So if I was physically taking a game, right, it's just stupid argument, right? It's like you wouldn't steal a car, right? But you would download a song, like stupid commercials. There is some truth to that, like, but I'm not taking it from somebody else, right? And again, if it's something that you're not providing anymore, right, and it's available on the internet, right, and I download it, I'm not taking that from you. I'm not taking it from somebody else, you know? So it's not the same. It's not like even just morally. I'm not even talking about legally, right? Yeah, of course it's illegal, right? But just because it's illegal doesn't mean that it's right. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
legal to own slaves, like not too long ago, right? Like way. They're slaves now. They're slaves not in America. But they are slaves now in the world still, right? And it's a legal thing, right? The law isn't moral or immoral. That's just the law, right?
Right.
So uh, I just want to say that software piracy isn't inherently immoral, and I don't know if you can at least understand that, right? Because I know where you stand on that, right? And I'm not saying you're wrong, right? I'm not
Yeah.
telling you you have to change your ways either, right?
Yeah.
But you could at least see what I'm saying a little bit, right?
No, no, you're making 1,000,000% of sense, bro. Like, in this specific example, right? So Melee, you're not taking a copy of Melee from someone else. When you pirate it, it's not, no one is gonna have empty hands that had a copy of Melee a second ago. So it's a very gray area because the company's not losing money from you pirating it, and the person isn't, no one is losing it. So with Melee specifically, piracy becomes a much grayer area. But the thing that I'm saying is that at the end of the day, even though that's true, you don't get to decide what happens with someone else's art. The person decides. And so if the person is telling you that they're not okay with even that, that's up to them. They're fully right to defend their artwork. And the reasoning for it, part of the reasoning for it is because Nintendo obviously wants to sell you their new stuff. So for example, they got rid of the Metroid 2 remake that a fan was making because they were making their own Metroid 2, and so they're not going to compete with themselves. And again, you have no permission to make something off of their artwork. You didn't create Samus or the music. You can't, even though you're not profiting off of it, you don't have the right to use it. So
Although I don't think that's also true either, but whatever. We're not gonna get into that. We'll just cut it there. That's where we both stand. I'd rather just move on. This isn't like a not everything needs to be cut and clear. The conversation is more important, and that's what we're here about at the Glentendo podcast.
true. I'm not trying to walk out of here converting anybody. I'm only trying to be truthful and honest to where I'm standing. But before we move on, I real quick, does that make sense to you that the artist determines what happens to their own art?
It does and it doesn't, but it's too long of a conversation.
All right, we'll have to record that some other time. Uh, we'll probably make that a bonus for Patreon. So please support if you want to hear that insanely detailed philosophical galaxy brain conversation. So, all right, moving on. Now that we established the big house situation, the hashtags, the anonymous tweet, what it means when Nintendo has supported the community in the past in its limited way. We covered, the limited way that they have partnered with events, what that meant, what that means, and we also covered how they promoted certain players and the community in a lot of their, E3 and like a lot of that stuff. So now we're going to get into what we can say is our possible solutions to this problem, right? Because the community is infuriated, and there are a lot of people making a lot of sense, and just like this conversation, there's a lot of sense being made, but there's a lot of sense not being made. And you're getting a lot of both things. And so um, I want to, I want you and I, as people who really know Smash and really know the community, to just kind of talk about what we think might help this, heal this wound so that people aren't so furious with Nintendo. The most obvious thing is the thing I think they should do. but I feel bad saying this because I don't think it's gonna happen, and I'm sure this is probably on your list as well. But the number one thing that they should do this, they need to do this. They need to figure out a way to do it, and I hope that they do. And I am for anyone who takes a dump on them for not doing this. They need to create a remaster or a port of Melee with the sole focus of tailoring it to that community so that it can survive. So the reason why this is like mandatory is because again, we covered this. Melee is not a game that is printed anymore, and that game is unique. It is not like Smash Brothers 64 or Brawl or Wii U or Ultimate. I think Nintendo had some hopes that with Ultimate they were going to bridge the gap and have everyone playing the same Smash game, but that is not going to happen. Melee is unique and singular, and they need to figure out a way that there's a big enough community there and there's enough people that will buy a remaster that is tailored for the competitive community where it makes sense for them to do that. And so I think that they need to do that for that scene to survive. Like, I don't know how many more years people are going to be able to spin those 20-year-old Melee discs that are not being printed anymore. And it just gets harder and harder. And then that community has to resort to piracy. So I think that they need to do it. The reason I don't think it's going to happen is because the right way to do it is to make it a fan mod version. Because even when you go to a Melee local, they're not running vanilla Melee. They're running a modded version of Melee that has controller fixes and a bunch of other little like changes that make it better for the competitive setting. There are a lot of like blind spots on the C stick, just like weird like things that the game has that people have fixed through mods. So the only way to do this right is to make
Some events do that. Not all events do that.
yeah, well, when they're partnered with Nintendo, they don't they run vanilla Melee without those mods. But Nintendo would need to make a official rollback version of Melee
Yeah.
available on modern consoles. This would sell millions of copies. It wouldn't compete with Ultimate. I think Ultimate's already at the end of its rope once the DLC is done, and they can probably just put this out without competing with it. First of all, what do you think of this idea? But second, and then after that, tell me if you think it's at all possible for Nintendo to break their tradition of being so controlling over their game that they would put out something that is like fan made like this, or
Okay.
like at least fan, a hybrid game like that.
So I don't. So I 100% agree. Right. That is the optimal solution for everyone. Right. You would think that alone, that everyone would be happy, would be enough, but I guess not. So I think that this might never happen. Right. Um, I don't remember or can think of any moment where Nintendo hired fan creators, right?
Hmm.
Um, Valve again. Valve is famous, for making like these mods of games, right? Or not, they didn't make the mods. They see mods of games that are very popular, and they see potential, and they bring that studio in, those group of people in to create a full scale version of it, right? Counter Strike, mod of Half Life, Team
Hmm.
Fortress was a mod of Quake, which was ported to Half Life, and then that became Team Fortress 2. Guilty Gear recently they implemented rollback to their latest game, right? By hiring the people who made the fan mod of their rollback, right? So they brought that in, right? So this isn't something that is unheard of, right? Hiring modders and fan creators, right? Sonic Mania, another big example, right? But I've never, ever, 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 ever heard of Nintendo doing that, right? I don't know if you have.
I've never seen any of that at all. The only maybe kind of sort of version of that is games like Mario Maker. You know what I mean? Like it's not like an official
Yeah,
thing.
but you're not bringing in people into your studio.
Not at all. And I actually do. Someone brought that up on Twitter, and I kind of want to push on that a little bit because I agree with you that for Melee, that's the right way to do Melee. But I do want there was somebody, I forgot who, somebody was saying they were just dumping on Nintendo saying like they're so close-minded, look at how much success these other companies have had, like letting fans mod their games and like just the fans know better, let the fans make the games. And it's like, all right, I agree that for this specific example, they should do it, but let's relax a little bit, please. Like Sega is only doing that with Sonic because Sonic games are trash. Okay? Valve is only doing that because Valve doesn't make video games anymore.
Hold on.
They don't make video games
Hold on.
anymore.
Shut up.
Hold on. Hold on. I know that for Valve, that's a bad example because after Counter Strike, they got involved and made it even better, and they had a great relationship with the modders, and then they made many games after that. But for the most part, they haven't shipped a game in over a decade.
Dude, that
Okay,
is irrelevant because during that time is when they were still making games for themselves. Counter Strike came in between Half Life and Half Life 2.
the reason why I think it's relevant is because Nintendo is still making games in all of these series and they're great. Nintendo makes great games. Dude, they don't make bad games like Sega does. They don't make any of these, all these franchises are still super important and some of them are more successful now than they've ever been. I personally I think there's a magic to that. It's not just open source all day. And for Valve, it works. I'm not making fun of open source. I'm just saying, like, there's also a magic to the closed source approach and the very tailored approach that Nintendo has. And they have a vision and it's very singular. And letting fans just make whatever they want is not going to work for everyone. And I think it's the opposite of what makes Nintendo great. But for Melee, I agree that they have to meet people in the middle if they want to get it right. So I'm trying to be just honest about this. Like, I think that it's a good approach for this specific example. I do not think it's a good approach moving forward into the future. Does that make sense?
It depends. It always gonna be
Okay.
depends. It always gonna be depends. It's Team Fortress 2. It's as good as it is now because of Valve. Or
Yeah.
rather, as good as it was back then because now it's a mess, right? That's a different story. But like all like the iconic characters and like this art style, it's very very eye catching art style. That was all Valve, man. But it's like of course from help of the community, right? But what the curation part comes from them, like accepting them, right? It's the fan creation that's for, let's say, Sonic Mania, right? Um, they didn't just pick random modders, right? They tested the waters with them. They let them port the iPhone version of Sonic the Hedgehog or Sonic 2, whatever, right? And then they did that. It's not like this random like anybody gets to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it's
But here's the thing. The thing is, with every example that you gave, right? Um, I think Valve is literally top three, maybe even top two, only second to Nintendo in terms of overall best game developers of all time, right? So they're not like Sega, because in my opinion, as someone who grew up on Sega, played all the best games on Genesis and Dreamcast, they've never been top tier at game design ever in their life. Valve has. And the difference, though, is that even as brilliant as Valve has been, the difference between Nintendo and all of those other open source or like involving the fans examples that you gave is that Nintendo, the brand and the name of the franchises and the characters and the games are mega huge. It is not close to, like, Valve is big. I'm not trying to make fun of Valve, but their biggest games are nowhere near as big as Mario or Zelda or Donkey Kong or any Animal Crossing. So like there's a different risk benefit there because it's like, dude, we built this Mount Everest, and now you're saying it's not good enough, and we need fans to do that to make it bigger. And it's like people, again, going back to way earlier in this episode to what I was saying, people need to remember how small the Twitterverse of your game is. The people talking about a game on Twitter is not reality. The audience for these games and for all these things is much bigger than what's on Twitter.
yeah.
So I'm not saying you're wrong. I think overall we're actually seeing the same thing, that it's a case by case basis. And I'm agreeing that for Melee specifically, you're 100% right. That's what they need to do for Melee. The
Yeah,
community has created what version of that game they want to see in the future. And like I said, Melee is not competing with Ultimate. There's no one who is going to buy Melee and not play Ultimate or vice versa. They're completely different audiences, or most people just buy both. I would buy both. Um, so that's we both are full agreement. I actually think they really need to do this. I hope that what they take from this is, guys, let's just do something we've never done and make a version of Melee that is immortal. So this Melee is the longest running fighting game ever. It went from 5 years ago when I entered the scene. We had to do insane like social media campaigns to get it to be an Evo. To be at Evo, which is the biggest fighting game tournament in the world every year, it was people were still making jokes that Smash Brothers not a fighting game. And now Melee is looked at as the greatest fighting game of all time, and it's the longest running. It's no other fighting game has been as immortal as Melee. So I think Nintendo has something so special here. They have an opportunity to make these characters and this game like really immortal. People are going to be playing Melee forever. Please do this, man. Please put this out.
yeah. It also just feels like a waste, right? Not just of melee, but it's like it's a waste of like potential talent, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so much talent in the world, right, that we don't know about. There's some really true artists out there, you know, like and that some even developers, right? The big name developers now, they started out just modding their favorite games and eventually created their own games. Not even like
Yeah.
the game that they were modding, just like their own completely original titles, right? So it just feels like like a waste of like not like seeing the talent out there.
Yeah. 100%. So the next thing that they can do is so we talked about earlier what it means when Nintendo does partner with an event, right? And one of the things that they could do overnight that would change so much for Smash players and for the community is that they could be throwing so much more money into the prize pools of each of these events so that the people competing have way more of an incentive to compete. And also, they're making a livable money off of these events. Capcom actually does this. Famously, the best Smash player in the world for Smash Brothers Wii U was Zero. And one of the reasons that he quit Smash competitively when Ultimate came out is that he said he could make way more money off of his YouTube channel than he could competing. And he made a whole video breaking down how much money people are making competing in the biggest fighting game ever, Melee, and even Ultimate, which is right up there. They're making so much less than what people make for doing Dragon Ball Fighter Z and Street Fighter and all those other games, which is just like insane because Smash is so much bigger than them, not just in the fighting community, but outside the fighting community. And Nintendo is insanely huge of a company. Dude, Nintendo could squash Capcom without even thinking about it. Like Nintendo is a billion times bigger than Capcom. And not just, dude, think about not just how much money they have. Think about what I just said earlier. Street Fighter is who doesn't know Street Fighter, right? Street Fighter is super famous, super popular. Smash Brothers Ultimate is the biggest fighting game ever in terms of sales. If they just took the money that they made off Smash Ultimate alone, forget all the other Nintendo money. Just think about what they made off of the game Smash Ultimate. It is an insane number. It is like double or triple what any Street Fighter game has ever done. So it's like they have the money, and it's something that's very simple to do is to throw pot bonus money in. It doesn't even require you to get super involved. It doesn't require them doing, a lot of like things that might compromise them in the future, blah, blah, blah. The other thing that they could be doing is also something as simple as just sending switches to these events so that there are a lot of setups with the game and you don't have TOs, having to buy dozens and dozens and hundreds of switches and copies of Ultimate to run an event. Some of these events have like, 500 people. And you remember when we were at Smash and Splash last year, like that tournament was great, but it was run really poorly. And part of the reason it was run really poorly is because they didn't have enough setups. They had actually a lot of room. They could have set up an entire other room. If they had more setups, that tournament would have ran a million times better.
Yeah.
So, like, think about how cheap that is for Nintendo to just make extra Switches
They
and
didn't have to
copies of
make
both.
extra switches. They could just rent them out. Not even rent them out, just like provide them and then pack
Yeah,
them back up. You know what I mean?
yeah,
They could just have like a set amount of switches, right? A
mhm,
hundred switches in their Nintendo garage, right? Ready to be played on, you know? So they have
yeah,
demo kiosks all over the world and like Target and Walmart or whatever, right? Like
yeah,
what's another hundred, you know, just for tournaments?
yeah, yeah. And so, you know, I think, are there any other solutions that you could think of that I didn't mention? I mentioned remastering Melee with
Price
fans,
pools.
prize pool of money, like Capcom does and like other companies do, and also, supplying actual support in terms of the switches and the actual game, so that these tournaments have what they need to take the capacity of players that they
Yeah.
have.
They also though they also should be well they do technically, right? They should be hosting their own tournaments, but hiring the people who make our tournaments, you know? And
Oh
kind
yeah,
of it should just be a Nintendo tournament, right? The Nintendo World Championship, right? Let's just call it that, right?
yeah,
right? And just have it be a regular Smash tournament, but it's the Nintendo World Championship, you know?
hmm,
It would not be difficult, especially if you're hiring the talent that we have, right? And we have some incredibly talented, dedicated folks in the community, right? So, you know, the talent is not a problem. The money isn't the problem. The game isn't the problem. The only problem is the attitude of Nintendo or why they want to do it, right?
yeah,
So that is the biggest thing to take away from that. They have decided for some reason, right, that they don't want to do that. It could be that the only thing that I can think of is that if they embrace the competitive side of it, right, that the they fear the casual audience might not be happy with that. You know,
hmm,
that's the only thing I can think of, right? That like
yeah,
that little Bobby Joe, 5 years old, is going to be too scared of competition, and that's going to be a lost sale. And that is a and those little Bobby Joes, those are the big numbers, you know. But it's not like Street Fighter games don't, you know, sell millions upon millions of copies, you know.
yeah. But it is very very small, and I think that actually is what happens to Street Fighter. Because even me, like, my first video game I ever played was Street Fighter 2, and as I got older, Street Fighter felt like a game that was only competitive. And there really didn't feel like there was any casual element, and I'm using casual in the sense of just non-competitive Smash. Like, you could be a hardcore gamer and not wanna play this game because you're like, "Yeah, I don't have any reason to go to a tournament or compete on a serious level," and it feels like the game is not designed to accommodate that person at all. So I think you're 100% right in the sense that Nintendo's probably looking at it from the perspective of, "We can't let the game the game be defined as a competitive game, because then it cuts into how many people feel they can come into it." And obviously, the biggest thing Nintendo does with all of their games is that they try to make it so that it scales between newcomers and experts,
Yeah,
and they don't want to cut out the newcomer at all.
yeah. So what I'm saying is that um, but Street Fighter again, like the competitive community isn't the only people that play that game, right? Because Street Fighter 4, you know, multi-platform game, 360, PS3, PC, maybe whatever. That game sold 10 million, or not like, around 10 million copies, maybe like 9.5 million copies, right? That is nothing to sneeze at, right?
Yeah.
So, and that game is a game that's seen as a competitive only game, but maybe that's only seen to us, the people who are
Yeah.
aware of that stuff, you know? So those little Bobby Joes and whatever, right? They might not even know about that, you know?
Honestly, if Nintendo focused on the hardcore community more, and I think they already did, but with the E3 and everything, even though at the E3 tournament, they did have like free for alls and stuff. Like they tried not to just have it be one on one and be our format of how we play the game. But I think you're right because they don't need to worry about that because the game's basic DNA just will always appeal to those people. Like the controls and the way that you can play with four
At
people
the
and
end
the
of the day,
character.
at the end of the day, people are going to see Mario, Pikachu, and Steve on the covers of these games, and they're going to buy it. You know,
Yeah. So now we've shifted to kind of like why they might be reluctant. And so I want to we went through possible solutions and I want to talk about why they might be reluctant. You're saying, they don't want to define it as a competitive game because it might cut the sales. And even though we both agree they're wrong if that is what they're thinking. But the other thing,
but it could still be what they're thinking. You know,
oh yeah, yeah, 100%. They could be 100% wrong and think that, yeah.
yeah.
Um, the other thing about this, like one of the reasons I think they might be reluctant is kind of a chicken or egg scenario where I think that Nintendo might not be supporting this more because Smash Brothers, competitive Smash, is not big enough. Now, the reason I say that's a chicken or egg scenario is because maybe it's not big enough because they don't support it more, or it could just be that it's just not big enough because if you think about it, in the bigger landscape of esports, fighting games are actually not that popular compared to all the other esports. So let me just give you a quick stat real quick, right? So Smash Ultimate set a viewership record at Evo in 2019. They had 279,000 peak viewers during Smash Ultimate's Evo stream, right? They broke the record with 279,000. Street Fighter, Dragon Ball, they were in shambles. Vegeta and Goku were like mind boggled that Mario showed up and he just bodied them with the viewers, right? If you go and look up the numbers that the top 10 esports make, first of all, Smash is not even there. It's not even top 10. And it's the biggest fighting game in terms of viewership.
It's just the biggest fighting game in almost every respect out of their money for competitors.
Yeah, 100%. So it's the biggest fighting game ever. And guess what? It's not even top 10 as an esport. And not only that, that number that I just recited, 279,000 peak viewers, that's the average for something like Dota and League. And dude, that's like literally if they had those numbers as their peak, they would be failures. You would never hear of these games in the way that you hear about them now. So again, I'm kind of saying though, I'm not letting Nintendo off the hook off that because it is possible. You could read that two ways. It's not bigger because Nintendo's not supporting it. But you could also look at it as like, dude, people are just not as into fighting games as in terms of esports as they are into other types of games. And it doesn't translate into a profitable industry that you can build for years and years to come. And so it actually might, maybe they don't want to get involved because it's just literally not worth the work or it's a losing business model. I can't tell you how many TOs I know, people who ran Shine famously said Shine is a tournament that happened in Boston every single year. What my favorite tournament to go to, I went to like 3 in a row. They lost money year after year. They did not have they didn't make their money back renting out the venue, all the stuff that goes into it. So it is possible that the community as big as we think it is not big enough to sustain real support from Nintendo. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and again, that is a chicken and the egg situation, right? Because we don't know because it's like the the support is so much different. Even for Street Fighter, it's still kind of different the way the way Valve does things or the way League does things, right? Like when you open up a League client, right? Like the Riot Games client or whatever, right? Like there's promotions in the game for the tournaments, you know, like you can spend money in Dota 2 for the international, right? The biggest competition for Dota 2, right? That's in the game, That if you had these Nintendo World Champions, right? And you don't have that when you start up Ultimate, it'll give you like a newsletter kind of thing. It's like this is a new spirits, stuff like that, right? They could easily be like Nintendo World Champions coming this year, like that
Yeah,
would cost them
yeah.
nothing.
And
Nothing.
also, even Capcom, if you watch Evo, they make custom levels for the Evo event that have like a Evo banner in the background of the game. But again, I want to say like the difference between Nintendo and these companies that you just mentioned, even for example, Riot. Riot owns League of Legends, right? And that game is the biggest esport game by a landslide. It's huge. It's number one. Riot is a small company. Nintendo could squash Riot without even blinking. Yet the difference in esports is like not even close. League is a million times bigger than Smash is as an esport, right? One of the things that I think about is that these smaller companies like Capcom and Riot, of course, they're going to put more into this because it might actually be profitable for them. Nintendo's so big that they might not make money off of this at all. It might need to be triple the size for a company like Nintendo to actually make money off of it. Whereas someone like Capcom, they might be more involved because they're like, dude, we don't make that much money compared to like the big guys. Like this is actually a good enough amount of money for us.
It could be possible, right? That there is money to gain, but they just don't think that it'll be enough for them to care.
It kind of goes into our final point, and we've kind of purposely avoided talking about this the entire podcast. Many names have come up throughout this podcast that are no longer welcome in the Smash community for various reasons. And so, the final reason why I think Nintendo would be reluctant, the elephant in the room, is that I remember this past summer. I'm going to start from square one because a lot of people may not know. This past summer, starting sometime in July, there was a big exodus. There was a reckoning where a lot of people in the Smash community took to Twitter to expose predatory behavior by other players in the community that had been happening, some of it for as far back as 5, 6, 7 years. Some of the stuff is like super heinous, super disgusting, and like it was such a big moment of so many different people accusing so many other different people of so many different things that it became like a big trending thing to the point where one of our key players, our most famous player, one of our most famous players was literally on the front page of ESPN.com over this. And just to see the headline, Super Smash Brothers, and then dot, 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 a bunch of other words and names, sexual assault. That from a distance alone, there were a lot of people, including myself, who, when I saw everything that happened that month, I was like, then you guys wonder why Nintendo doesn't want to get involved. Because Nintendo's not Capcom. Nintendo's not Namco. They are they serve this unique position in the gaming industry where they can make a game like Breath of the Wild that's like the most hardcore and inventive like open world game, but they also function as an entry point and a safe like entry point for people who are new to games or are really really young, and they cannot afford to get involved in a community and then have stuff like that happen and be associated with their game. Whether it's right or wrong, I'm not saying that it's right. I would be the type of person that if I saw a headline, I'm not going to just go, oh, that game must be bad. I'm not going to take my kid to the tournament. I'm not that kind of person. But there are a lot of people out there like that. And you don't want that brand affiliation. Again, you guys, people on Twitter kept bringing up how Capcom does things differently. I'm like, bro, Capcom's mascot is not Mario. It is not the same thing. It is not even close to being the same thing. This is Nintendo's unique. There's not a single company that functions like them in video gaming. It would be like if you found out that if you took your kid to a Disney movie, there were sexual predators at Disney movies in a disproportionately high frequency.
To be fair, right? To be fair, there are a lot of sexual predators in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Definitely even more so than any video community. Right? Right?
I'm like, where's he going with this?
Right? So I get what you're saying, right? But this also is, again, that's like those things happened afterwards, right? You know, like, d- like again, I like the biggest comparison Nintendo is made to is Disney, right? Because they're also a very tightly run ship in terms of intellectual property, right? And the way they deal with that, right? And being child friendly and all that, you know. But there are always rumors about that kind of stuff going on in Hollywood, and even the land of Disney, right? And that didn't deter them from getting involved in other things, you know. So I don't know if that's valid, but I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but what I'm saying is that you can't. It's hard to say that when those things happened years after non-support. You can't. It's like those things happened afterwards. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but, like, again, it's a little different because, like, the Hollywood example is not tied to a specific thing. Like, if this was about sexual assault in fighting game community in general, then it would be different. But because it was specifically Smash, like, almost all of the stories were specifically in the Smash community, it became synonymous with that game and that community, and it would be more of an equivalent example of, like, imagine you heard that there were a high amount of sexual predators at Disneyland specifically. What we're talking about is there are sexual predators who play Smash Brothers and you don't know who they are and blah 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 and like this could just happen. You're not going to let your kid go to a tournament.
Yeah.
So,
My problem with this whole thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but the problem with my whole thing is that it's not that Smash Brothers is infested with child predators, right? It's that child predators exist in the world, right? All over the world, you know, and you don't know who they are, right? It's not that the Smash Brothers are infested with them; is that they called them out,
yeah.
and that's kind of like the grim reality of it, That
Yeah.
like it's not that these people don't exist other places, is that people aren't talking about it. Child predatory behavior. It might be the most like swept under the rug situation like of all time.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I fully agree with you. And I'm not saying it's fair. If I was someone who didn't know anything about Smash and I saw the headlines from this past summer, it wouldn't have changed my opinion on sending, if I had a kid if to go to a tournament because I know that it's not that like you just said, this is something that happens in a lot of communities and they just so happened there was a reckoning in Smash specifically, but it's not like there's anything about that game that attracts those people specifically. There's a lot of different reasons for why these things happen. So that's my theory on maybe why one of the many reasons they're reluctant to get more involved. To sum up,
Maybe now, but I don't buy that for that, but for
yeah,
before, because they have run events, you know. It's just not the events that we would go to, you know. They run like these item brackets with weird formats, or they've done it a lot. They've done it a lot, right? So it's not like they're reluctant to host tournaments. It's just they want it done in a very specific way. So I don't agree with that. And maybe now they're more reluctant to do it, right? But I don't agree with that being the case for before.
yeah, but even before, like companies just have policies like that where they it's not like they knew ahead of time, hey, there's a sexual predator problem in the Smash community, and that's why we won't support them. That's not what happened. But the companies tend to limit their interaction with communities where they have no accountability and that they can't distance themselves from what can happen. Not just with like that specific example, but like in general with anything. You know what I mean? Like we can't afford to have bad headlines and we're going to be the ones that the headlines are about, even if it's other people. Like we need to vet who we're affiliated with. Every company does it. Like they're not just going to affiliate with anybody. They need to affiliate with people that they can trust, aren't going to bungle things up and all this other stuff. So I get what you're saying. It's like it's not like they were retroactively predicting that was going to happen and that's why they didn't support. But I mean, if you know how brands operate, they usually just do stuff like that. They're not going to. An even smaller example is just like there are companies in the NBA or sponsors that once they see somebody says some reckless thing, they don't affiliate with that person, and they tend to not affiliate with people ahead of time that they think might say something reckless and make the company look bad. Like, oh, we're not going to sponsor that player or that dude or that actor because he's known for saying this and this and that. And maybe that was part of the calculation.
But what I'm saying is that if they had their own events that they sanctioned, this is the Nintendo World Champions, right? They had everything in control, and they're simply hiring people to do the work, right? They're not the front lines guys. They're not, they could have their own like MCs and stuff, like
Yeah, that is 100% what they should do. That just seems so like obviously the right thing to do. And there are plenty of members of this community that are great people, man, that like you could trust, that you could hire. And imagine getting that call and you're a TO and you've been running great tournaments for, a decade or more. And Nintendo's like, yeah, we want you to just do the same thing, but for us, and we'll pay you. And it's like a real job. That would be amazing. And they can do that. And it would fix so many problems, man. Like, to sum up, just to sum up everything we talked about, because I know this is an epic, epic episode. Um, when it comes to the big house situation, I'm actually on Nintendo's side for that. So you guys get at me. I'll DM you my address. We can square up. You're not going to show up. So careful what you say, buddy. All right. They have every right to shut that down. I think Big House messed up. They should have just ran Ultimate. They should have just listened, and then they got shut down. In terms of supporting the community in a bigger way, I think Nintendo's done a poor job of that. Like, even if that anonymous Twitter was wrong, there's so many things that we pointed out that they could have been doing that other companies do that would have changed so much for the Smash community. And there are so many talented players who would be in a different place now had Nintendo gotten involved in a more meaningful way earlier. And there's a lot of time lost. Like, there are people who their lives would have been very, very different had Nintendo made even some of the slightest like emotions towards these things that we mentioned. So there's that. And yeah, I think just to sum up, like they need to make an immortal they need to make an immortal version of Melee. It's the biggest fighting game ever. It's the best fighting game ever. It's the GOAT. It deserves it just out of pure respect. Put respect on Melee's name. Make an immortal copy, please. So that's where I end on all of this. Where do you after this long odyssey of a conversation, where have you washed ashore? Tell me where you're at.
pretty much the same place I always am. This should have been an easy win. Nintendo is a company that is full of easy wins that they refuse to take. You know, and it's a little. It's not little. It's very disappointing. You know,
Yeah.
this whole like boycott Nintendo for this. It's like I don't can't tell if you're being serious. you know, um, they've done much worse.
It also doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? You're boycotting a company that you like their stuff so much that you need more versions of what they do.
yeah.
This is like, I want to eat so bad, I'm gonna kill the chef.
Yeah. I don't know what people expect to happen. I mean, I honestly expect nothing to happen. I honestly expect nothing to happen because their stance on like releasing old games doesn't seem to be changing. If anything, it seems to be getting worse. Right, with like this how 3D All Stars and like the Fire Emblem thing, right? They're limited releases, right?
Yeah.
It seems that they're not getting any better. I uh I'm a big Nintendo fan of their work, right? But I've been very critical of their policies on many different things, right? So I never expect things to get better. Why would things ever get better?
Yeah, true. But yeah, like they're not about to just all of a sudden love rollback and learn how to do that. Like even though there are, talented, like there are people who just did it for fun over a weekend.
Yeah,
So it's
and
like,
I want to vilify the people on Twitter a little bit, right? I am always for complaining in any field, right? Because the complaining is the only way people know they're not doing things right, you know.
Yeah.
And even if it's like an artwork, right? And you're like, I don't like this because of that, right? You are open to that opinion, and I can either take that opinion and work from it, right? Or I could realize that you're wrong and not take something over it, right? But I'm not going to take away your right to complain.
Yeah. And I actually look at this podcast as a complaint because at the end of the day, I'm telling you all the things that I think Nintendo needs to do to fix this and that they should have been doing. But the difference is that the people on Twitter are complaining in a way that is so irrational and some of the arguments are so dumb. I'm not everybody. There are plenty of people making like a lot of sense on this topic on Twitter. I'm just like I hate how dumb some people's arguments are and it makes things worse. It doesn't actually help when you make it a mess. When you DM Nintendo of America, F you. How is that helping anyone? Like, what? Like, that just makes you look cool to your little friends on Twitter and your little audience. That is like a performance. It is not effective
Yes,
change.
no, yeah,
And
that is 100% true. We definitely need more. We need better criticism, right?
yeah, that's why we have us. So now that we've taken this insane journey with this whole thing, how do you feel about this episode? Do you think we nailed it? Yes or no? I think we did a good job on this one.
I think it was pretty good. I think we could have expanded on more things, but we've already been talking for a long time.
Thank you as always for joining me, buddy. Thank you guys. See you next week. I hope you enjoy the show. You can follow me on Twitter at Super Glentendo. You can follow Arhungry at MF_Arhungry. And you can find his great work on YouTube at youtube.com/Arhungry. The Glentendo podcast is a weekly Nintendo/Smash community podcast. Our aim is to have galaxy brain conversations on all things Nintendo. If you like the show, please consider becoming a friendo and supporting at patreon.com/Glentendo. Friendos get early access to the show each Friday. The show then becomes available to all for free the following Monday on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify right now and you like the show, give it a good review. It helps support a lot more than you might think. This show is brought to you by our amazing producers, Naomi, Eduardo, and the legendary Riz.